Thank you, Lizzie. That was great. That was just so detailed and actionable. I really feel like I learned a lot from that talk. So I forgot to mention this at the beginning as me failing in my hosting duties, but you can put in your questions to Lizzie in the Q&A bit. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen on Zoom, there should be an option which says Q&A. So if you click that, then you can type in questions for Lizzie about her talk, and we'll be reading them out here. So first question is from Leah. So Leah says, thank you, Lizzie, for mentioning gently correcting someone if it's needed. Can you share a little bit about how you handle needing to address something that emerges during a workshop? For example, someone unintentionally does a casual racism, sexism, ableism, or if there's an active bystander in the group who is flagging something to you as the facilitator. How do you approach this when facilitating alone, and how do you approach it when co-facilitating?
Yeah, it is really tricky. I think it does slightly depend on the situation. If it's one thing that someone has said and it's sort of not still sort of repeated as an issue, then I think that would be one where again it would slightly depend on what you say. I think that often with things like that, if you can in the moment say, oh no, like that's not the right term, or someone uses someone's wrong pronoun, for example, you can go, oh no, that, and it's it can be a nice kind of quick correction, and then people are like, oh right, yeah. And again, if it is, you can say, that's not a good term, or that's not, and being able to kind of correct at the moment is great if you can. If it's something that's more kind of ongoing, then so hang on, I'm trying to just reread the whole question. So if there's an active writer that's flagging something to you, I mean, the first thing that I would do is, it depends what kind of tool you're using, but it's kind of send that person just like a direct message, and say, can you not use that term, or can you not kind of do that? I think it's why I don't really go into that. That's why it is really good to have a co-facilitator whenever you can with that kind of thing, so that if you're kind of you're kind of trying to host a session and try and talk about that, then the other person can kind of just can flag. You can just meet people directly. I've never had to do that, but yeah. So basically, I'd say correct at the moment if you can. Message privately, kind of one-to-one, as kind of the next step. Mute and just kick out, when necessary, and just kind of make sure that you're explaining that. Does that answer your question, Leah? Is that just add anything? Okay. Move on to the next question, Marissa.
Yeah, next question. Next question is, can you talk a little bit more about self-excluding not being an accommodation option? Are you saying that it should be an option, but you need to make your presentation accessible and inclusive should be the priority? And I'm going to tack on a question of my own here, which I had when you were talking about this, which is just for people that do need to step out, if you have any suggestions about the best ways to care for people that have to leave the room. And kind of, you did talk about this a little bit, but I'm also curious to know if you have any further thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it really depends. We'll start with that bit. So it kind of depends, obviously, whether you're doing like an online or an in-person kind of thing. In person, I would say, just try and have like a space and make sure people know, like, if you need to step out, this is where you can go. You can't go everyone, obviously, but if there's a there's a cafeteria area, or you go outside, or make sure people have got kind of a comfortable way. Online, I would say, same kind of thing, like remind people that they can just kind of turn the sound off and minimize the screen. They don't have to leave the session necessarily, or this is how, remind them of how they can rejoin the session if they do actually just kind of leave and want to come back. Going back to the kind of the full question, I mean, yes, it should be accessible, it should be inclusive, but so there's things like I did I did want to talk originally about icebreakers as part of this, and I had to cut it because I think so. I'm trying to cover quite a lot of this. Um, and there's a lot of kind of things where it's like, well, we'll get up and move around, and it's, I'm a wheelchair user, and I can't do a lot of getting up and walking around. People will go, oh, don't worry, you don't have to join in. I don't feel like you need to join in this part. You can sit here, it's fine. And I've been like, well, okay, I don't feel fine. I feel left out. So, but and this happens in kind of various kind of different situations. We're like, oh, it's fine. You can still, you can not join in this bit, and we'll see you later, kind of thing. And yeah, it just doesn't feel nice, and you miss bits, and you're not as involved. So, but you equally, if someone is uncomfortable in a situation, they need to be able to self-exclude if they want to. Does that I don't know who wrote that question. They might want to say anonymous, but if anyone does want to clarify what is meant, if I haven't covered that answer, I'm aware that I do talk very fast, which is in complete contradiction to what I just said about talking slowly. Apologies. But yeah. Am I said yeah?
Yeah, thank you. That covers it. So next question from Alicia. Alicia asks, and I'm wondering about this as well. So she says, I'm wondering how you usually ask for needs ahead of time, trying not to frame it as, does anyone need extra accommodations? So what is a good way to frame that? And then how should it be done? So for example, survey, email. I feel like it could be difficult to know what is and isn't possible to ask for participants.
Yeah, I think this is really important, because I think there's two things. I think framing as extra is, do you need to do extra work is not good language, and also there's often things that people would love to say, but they think they don't, because it's not necessarily an accessibility accommodation. The other side of that is that they won't say it. I tend to do it by emails, but this is, I sort of do tend to be with kind of fairly small groups, and I would just say in an email, I'll sort of introduce myself and kind of, this is, I'm coming in for the company doing this, that kind of thing. Please let me know if there's anything that would, I can't think of the exact wording offhand, but that would help you to be able to access. And I will sometimes give an example. So, for example, if you've got if you've got any visual difficulties, if you might find online, might find online boarding tools difficult, if you've got caring responsibilities and might need to leave early, anything like that, message me directly. And I think that does make a bit of a difference when I mean, up to, but just in my experience, I'll say email me directly and just tell me. I'm not, it's not going to be something that's shared with everyone. It's not going to be something that's shared with the employer. So sometimes if I'm coming in doing a session for like a company, me saying for those people directly, just like, tell me, you don't have to, this isn't, there's nothing you have to disclose to your employee. There's nothing, you're just telling me, tell me a thing that might help you. Really, really happy to kind of hear whatever. So that tends to be the way that I do it. I'm not saying that's necessarily the perfect, absolute correct way, but that's worked for me.
Great.
I hope that helps. I've lost track of who asked that, because most is very helpfully ticked it off. But okay. Alicia, yes, Alicia was you. Thank
you. I'm going to now jump in with another question of my own, which is about content warnings. So for, I guess I have two questions about this. So first, as somebody who researches sensitive topics, I feel like sometimes, our work could just be one big content warning. So first is trying to figure out how could I usefully content warning things that I'm doing without just, every single thing is potentially content warning. And then the second one is, and because I feel like this is something which is debated quite a lot, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on this, is about kind of personal responsibility in content warnings. How much should I be doing in terms of caring for other people versus how much responsibility do they have for caring for themselves? Like, how do we kind of scaffold that in a useful way where I'm not putting all the burden on somebody else?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to be like micromanaging their interactions and kind of, you know, hanging over their shoulder. So
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, it's obviously there's a lot in there, but
Right, lots to unpack.
it is a tricky area and trying to kind of work out what you want. And I think within a talk, like don't like be just constantly warning every two, say at kind of the beginning of what might be covered. I mean, don't, this is really obvious maybe, but don't cover triggering topics if you don't need to. Is one thing that helps keep it. But I think people do have responsibility, obviously for that, for managing their own emotions, and not only responsibility but autonomy and knowledge about managing how they want to, working out how they want to manage that. And I think giving people as options, kind of as the previous question about kind of offering areas or offering solutions, kind of this is something you can do. If it's something you're going to be covering obviously a lot in if you had like a whole conference like this, for example, where everything was like very and it was in person, and you might want to have even people around like I guess I was thinking I went to an event with an access angel, and there was someone there to ask if you needed, you can get through a door or whatever, but also if you're feeling upset, whatever. So you might want with a big event to have like some dedicated people to go to, but ultimately people will know, well, people I know have strategies of dealing with kind of what they do when certain topics come up. You can have, well-being sessions, well-being information. Here's some things to do. I think you can't take full responsibility for exactly somebody's reaction as long as you've kind of made sure that you're covering things in a sensitive way and that you are warning people that you're going to cover them. I think if you're suddenly ambushing people with things, then in a way that gives you a lot more responsibility for the response. With like health and safety, right? If someone cuts their finger open, okay, you maybe got first aid kit, and if you leave knives everywhere, then you're much more kind of responsible for the fact that people are going to get injured. That is a metaphor, but it's yeah, exactly the same thing. Does that kind of, and there's a lot in that question, and I don't at all pretend to have all the answers to that because it is really difficult. I think I've forgotten what talks, there was a talk last week that I went to for this about kind of managing trauma in research. And when you're really talking about traumatic topics at that level, then I think it is a deeper level of really having to engage with that I'm not going to claim to be an expert in. Does that kind of answer your question, Melissa?
Yes. Yes. And I like that taken. I think because I think what you're saying is that it's about giving people the tools to be able to do things, but not
Yeah,
making the decision for them.
not deciding what tool they use or trying to use the tool for them. Yeah, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's exactly it. Just
Okay.
looking at the question in the
Um,
chat.
uh,
So Leah is saying, Alicia's question about asking for needs ahead of time is bringing to mind experiences, mainly in government work, but asking about needs ahead of time with no idea about how things like interpretation and translation or support workers would be commissioned or paid for less than the ages. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's why designing things to be universally accessible is also just, it's going to be helpful because you don't know when someone might come along and say, I need this. And it is tricky. I mean, someone comes along and says they need BSL, for example, and you don't have like that is, it's an expense, but it's also trying to find the right person is, it is when you, depending on the size of the event, you can have someone that is just there doing it, and that's great. And that would be the ideal thing. If it is a really small event, having BSL for everything can be really difficult. So even just the availability, actually, frankly, of interpreters for things like that is difficult. But you definitely need to think of it on a budgetary level, and it's it's hard. It's definitely, yeah, it is a lesson to learn.
we just have a few more minutes. And so I'm going to selfishly squeeze in another of my own questions. which is that when you were talking about alternatives for kind of online whiteboard tools, um, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm really curious to know kind of what factors you feel are the most important to consider when looking at suitable alternatives.
Um, okay, so ordering and being able to navigate through something, I think is meant, can you keyboard navigate? I think is a really simple test. I think again, Marion and Kevin, who they did a workshop in this last week. I mentioned this in the chat, but for anyone that didn't see the chat, Marion Avery and Kevin McLaughlin, who did a workshop last week, I think the talk part of it, Marissa was saying, is available as a recording, and I'd really recommend that. And they've got sort of top tips and they kind of go into some of this, but keyboard navigating is really good for any kind of really, really quick basic accessibility check. Can you keyboard navigate through it? And, is it taking you sensibly to the next part? Is it easy to move things around if it's necessary to move things around? Then yeah, can you actually do that, not necessarily using drag and drop? What happens when you zoom in? What happens when you do magnify? Does the things reflow and resize properly, or do you just get like one giant post-it? So yeah, ordering and how much you can move things around and how things are sensibly linked, I think is just a really big thing for there. And it's just, make it as only as complicated as it needs to be. I think this is actually point one from Maren and Kevin's talk, was like, don't if you just need like a bit of space for people to write things down quickly, then there's no reason why you can't just use Google Docs. Don't try, and particularly things like a lot of the tools kind of, they introduce the new features, and I'm like, oh, a new feature, what does that still have to do? That's fun. And it's like, it is fun, but is it actually useful for the goals of what it's trying to do? And quite possibly not. I mean, the session I did was just using Google Docs. A couple people there who just didn't really just didn't work online a lot. And even with Google Docs, I was struggling to go, so how do I get that link? Where do I write in this? I'm like, if I tried to use like something like Miro, they'd have been so lost. Yeah, just make it simple it needs to be, and make sure it's navigable and zoomable. I think it's probably will cover then quite a lot. And they don't use color, but yeah. The thing is with color, you can use tools that exist, just don't use color to mean things within those. Or don't use only color. I think that's really important. Like particularly something like Trello, if you've got like a Trello label, it'll be color coded. Having the different colors for different labels is actually really helpful. But the labels are also there. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Lizzie, for all that insight. Really useful session. I've selfishly squeezed in a lot of my own questions. So thank you very much. So everyone, we're going to be taking a break now until Caitlin's session. So we're going to be reconvening at past. So that is 1:30 GMT time for those of you who are on GMT. So I will see you all then.
Bye.